During our weekly Sunday dinner, my daughter squeezed my hand and whispered softly, "Mommy, when can I stop taking the love candy?" Can you imagine finding out your own husband and your best friend were systematically drugging your 7-year-old daughter for a beauty pageant? The sheer gut-wrenching betrayal of that moment shattered my entire world into a million pieces. It all started innocently enough. I was tucking my sweet Gigi into bed, a gentle smile on my face. "What candy, sweetie?" I asked. "You know we don't do candy before bed." But next to me I felt my husband, Brandon, shift uncomfortably. And my best friend, Oilia, who was supposed to be family, suddenly got extremely interested in her wine glass. That's when Gigi whispered, her voice tiny and innocent, "The pink ones from Daddy's drawer. Auntie Oilia gives them to me after school when you're not home." My smile evaporated. "I don't understand," I said slowly, a cold dread starting to creep in. "It's our secret," Gigi whispered again, almost too softly to hear. "Daddy says if I tell you, I won't get pretty enough for the pageants. But they make my tummy hurt so bad, Mommy." Oilia's knuckles went white around her purse. She tried to dismiss it. "She's just confused about her vitamins." "What is she talking about, Brandon?" My voice, I heard it, it was sharp, cutting through the silence of the dining room. "They're just supplements for energy," Brandon mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "Supplements? Then why is it a secret?" The pieces, sickeningly, started to fall into place. The mystery stomach pain that had plagued Gigi for months. The heart palpitations doctors couldn't explain. The terrifying weight loss that had everyone complimenting how healthy she looked, while she could barely keep food down. It was all there. "Show me these vitamins now." Oilia started to protest. "They're perfectly safe." But I was done. "Show me." Brandon fumbled for his phone, but I snatched Oilia's purse, appending it. Credit card statements, dozens of them, scattered across the floor. Charges to overseas companies. My breath caught in my throat. "You've been drugging our baby." My voice rose, raw with disbelief and rage. The social worker visits. Oh God, the social worker visits. They thought I was starving her. Neighbors called CPS 3 times because she kept fainting at the bus stop. Brandon's face went white. "That wasn't supposed to," he stammered. "I lost my nursing license," I continued, tears finally burning my eyes. 10 years of night school, fighting my way up to head nurse at Children's Hospital, gone. All because I couldn't explain why my daughter's blood work showed metabolic damage. We had to sell my mom's house, the one she left us, to pay for cardiac specialists for a 7-year-old. My son, my sweet Oliver, wouldn't even eat meals with us anymore. I choked on a sob. Oliver told his teacher he was scared he'd get sick like Gigi. He was hoarding food in his room, for God's sake, because he'd watched his sister collapse at dinner. He's 5 years old and he hoards food. Just then Gigi swayed in her chair, her tiny lips tinged blue. "I'm sorry, Mommy," she whispered, barely audible. "Daddy said when I'm skinny like Sydney's daughter, he won't want to move away." The room went dead silent. My blood ran cold. "What did you just say, baby?" Auntie Oilia started sobbing, gripping the table for balance. "She said when I'm tiny enough, Daddy will love us and won't leave for Sydney's family." "Sydney?" Everything clicked into sickening focus. "Your CrossFit trainer. The one with the perfect daughters who model." Brandon's phone buzzed. He lunged for it, but I was faster. A text from Oilia sent 30 seconds ago. "She knows. Don't let her stop now. Durkumer says 10 more pounds and she'll be pageant ready." I scrolled up frantically. "Increased dose this week. She's down to 52 pounds. Brandon, she looks incredible. Sydney will be so jealous." My hands shook violently. You're coordinating this together?" Oilia stepped forward, her voice a desperate plea. "You don't understand the pressure he's under. Sydney's husband got him that promotion opportunity in Miami. If she wins Little Miss Florida, we'd have a reason to." Before she could finish, Gigi's eyes rolled back. She crumpled, her tiny body convulsing violently on the dining room floor. "Gigi!" I screamed, dropping to my knees. Blood-tinged foam poured from her mouth as her body seized. "Stay with Mommy, baby. Stay with me." The kitchen door burst open. Oliver stood there in his pajamas, his face heartbreakingly blank. "Is Gigi dying again?" My 5-year-old had seen this so many times it was routine. "Call 911. I screamed at Brandon, who stood frozen, utterly useless. Call them now. I turned Gigi on her side, timing the seizure, just like I'd been trained to do as a nurse. The blood was getting darker, almost brown. I'm calling the police. I reached for my phone, but Oilia grabbed my wrist. No, you can't. Look at her. She's finally thin. She's perfect, just like Sydney's girls. Brandon caught me from behind, his arms locking around me. I'm sorry. He sobbed against my neck. I'm so sorry, but it's what's best for all of us. You'll thank me when we're in Miami. With a strength born of pure primal rage, I broke free and lunged for my phone. But Oilia was already dialing. 911, please help. My friend has been giving her daughter illegal diet pills. The child is seizing. I ripped my phone from my pocket, one hand still on Gigi's shaking body, screaming over Oilia into my own phone as I dialed. No, that's a lie. The 911 operator answered, and I shouted the truth, my voice raw and desperate, while Gigi's small frame jerked against the hardwood. My daughter's been poisoned with diet pills by her father and his girlfriend. I have text messages proving it. She's having a seizure. We need help now. The operator's voice stayed eerily calm, asking for our address. Brandon stood frozen, white as a sheet, while Oilia babbled on about me being unstable. I pressed speaker so the operator could hear everything, holding Gigi's head to keep it from hitting the floor while blood mixed with spit ran down her chin. EMS and police are 3 minutes out, the operator said. I counted Gigi's seizure hitting 2 minutes, then 3. Her lips were turning darker blue. Oliver watched from the doorway with those empty eyes that just broke my heart. The siren screamed closer. Suddenly, the front door burst open. 2 paramedics rushed in, bags in hand. The young guy, with steady hands, dropped beside us and started checking Gigi's vitals. His partner, an older woman, got the oxygen mask ready. How long has she been seizing? I told them, for minutes now, and shoved Brandon's phone with those horrific texts at them. I'm a nurse. My license is suspended, but I know what I'm seeing. She's been given stimulants, probably mixed with thyroid medication. The woman paramedic nodded, calling it into the hospital as they got in. 4 started in Gigi's tiny arm. A patrol officer walked through the door just as they loaded Gigi onto the stretcher. We need statements from everyone, he said. But the male paramedic cut him off. The kid comes first. You can sort it out at the hospital. Brandon started to follow the stretcher, but the officer stopped him. Sir, I need you to stay here. Brandon tried his vitamin story again, but I shoved my phone at the officer. These are texts between my husband and her. I pointed at Oilia, planning to drug my daughter for pageants. The officer's eyebrows shot up. He called for backup and a detective. I climbed into the ambulance with Gigi. Oliver ran after me and I pulled him up too. There was no way I was leaving him alone with Brandon. The ride to Children's Hospital took forever and no time at all. The paramedics worked on Gigi while she finally stopped seizing, but she remained unconscious. We burst through the emergency department doors, and I saw faces I knew from my years working there. Marie, the triage nurse, her eyes wide when she recognized me. We need a full talk screen with chain of custody documentation, I told her as they wheeled Gigi into a trauma room. This is evidence in a criminal case. We need forensic-level preservation of all samples. Marie nodded, flagging the charge nurse. The ED physician, a tall woman I didn't recognize, started examining Gigi. Oliver pressed against my side as we watched them work, drawing blood and starting fluids while Gigi's heart monitor showed an irregular rhythm. The physician pulled me aside after 20 minutes, her face grim. I have to notify CPS about suspected child endangerment. It's mandatory reporting protocol. My stomach dropped hard because CPS had already investigated me 3 times because of Gigi fainting. But I nodded because now the truth would finally come out. They already have 3 reports on file blaming me, I told her. But those were before we knew she was poisoned. The social worker showed up within an hour. A young man with kind eyes who took notes as I explained everything. They moved Gigi up to the PICU for monitoring, and Oliver and I followed, settling into the family lounge with its uncomfortable chairs and flickering TV. Night fell and Oliver curled up against me, his small voice breaking the silence. Is Gigi going to die this time? I held him tight and promised she wouldn't, even though my voice shook. watching the monitors through the glass door while nurses checked on her every few minutes. The ED physician came back around midnight with preliminary results, pulling me into the hallway. "We're seeing elevated levels consistent with stimulant and thyroid hormone exposure," she said. "I'm ordering specialized panels to identify the specific substances." Relief washed over me so hard I almost fell. Finally, medical proof after months of being blamed for Gigi's weight loss and heart problems. Morning came slowly and I hadn't slept. Oliver was drooling on my shoulder when a man in a gray suit walked in. "I'm Detective Desmond Grimes," he said, shaking my hand. "I need to see everything you have." I showed him the complete text chain between Brandon and Oilia, scrolling through months of messages about doses and weights and that Dr. Kumar, who was apparently in on it. Then I pulled up the credit card statements I'd found, dozens of charges to overseas companies that Brandon had hidden from me. Grimes took photos of everything, then sat down with the notebook. "Here's how this works," he said. "The texts are good evidence, but we need the actual pills to make charges stick." He explained about search warrants and building a case, telling me to document everything from now on. Every symptom, every conversation, every medical record. We can get them on child endangerment for sure. Maybe more depending on what we find. Just after lunch, a woman with graying hair and a worn briefcase arrived. "I'm Melinda Haynes from CPS," she said, sitting down carefully like she didn't want to scare us. She pulled out the 3 previous reports where neighbors had called about Gigi, reading through them with new eyes. "They thought you were starving her," she said slowly. "But looking at this pattern with what we know now, she was poisoned the whole time." Oliver wouldn't let go of my hand during the entire interview, pressing against me while Melinda asked gentle questions about what he'd seen at home. He told her about Gigi falling down at dinner and Daddy giving her special candy, and how he kept food in his room because he was scared of getting sick too. Melinda took notes, her face getting sadder with each detail, promising Oliver that she would help keep him and Gigi safe. That night, after Melinda left, I sat in the empty hospital hallway with my laptop balanced on my knees. The harsh fluorescent lights made my eyes burn as I started typing everything I could remember. Every symptom Gigi ever had. Every doctor visit where they couldn't explain her heart racing. Every time she threw up her dinner. Every collapse at school that got blamed on me not feeding her enough. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my nurse training kicking in as I organized it all into a timeline that showed the pattern clearly. The more I typed, the angrier I got because it was all there. Months of my baby suffering while I got blamed for it. I pulled up our online banking next, scrolling through transaction after transaction I'd never paid attention to before. There they were. Dozens of charges to websites with names like Pharma Direct and Overseas RX, all on a credit card in Oilia's name. But the payments came straight from our joint checking account. Some charges were $200, some were $500, and they went back almost a year. The betrayal felt worse seeing it laid out in black and white. Every transaction proof that Brandon had been planning this while I worked night shifts to pay for Gigi's medical bills. I took screenshots of everything, saving them to 3 different cloud accounts because I wasn't taking any chances with this evidence disappearing. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I walked down to the lab where my former colleague Sarah was working the night shift. She recognized me immediately, and her face went soft when I explained about the criminal investigation and needing Gigi's samples preserved under forensic protocol. Sarah promised she'd handle it personally, labeling everything with proper chain of custody documentation and storing it in the locked forensic freezer. Having someone on my side who understood the medical side of this helped more than I could say. The next afternoon, Brandon showed up at the PICU, trying to sweet-talk the nurses into letting him see Gigi, telling them I was having a mental breakdown and making false accusations. The charge nurse called security when he wouldn't leave, and I showed them the emergency protective order paperwork I was getting ready to file. Brandon's face went red when security escorted him out, yelling that I couldn't keep him from his daughter. But they made it clear he wasn't getting anywhere near Gigi without a court order. Detective Grimes called me that evening, his voice serious as he explained I needed to file for an emergency protective order right away to keep Brandon and Oilia away from the kids legally. He emailed me the forms and walked me through each section over the phone, making sure I understood what to write and what evidence to attach. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse with Oliver sleeping in his car seat, my hand steady as I filled out every page of the protective order request. I wrote out exactly what they'd done to Gigi, attached the screenshots of the texts and bank statements, and included the preliminary toxicology report from the hospital. The clerk took one look at the medical records and expedited everything, scheduling the hearing for the next morning. That afternoon, I met with Sananade Padet, Oliver's school counselor, in a small conference room at the school while a nurse watched Gigi at the hospital. Sananade pulled out a thick folder she'd been keeping for months, full of notes about Oliver's behavior. Changes, his food hoarding, the times he'd told her about Gigi getting sick at home. She'd documented everything, dates and times, and direct quotes from Oliver about being scared to eat dinner. This independent record from someone outside our family would be huge for our case. 3 days later, my phone rang with Oilia's number. I almost didn't answer, but then I remembered we lived in a one-party consent state for recording. I hit record on my phone and answered, listening to her sob about how sorry she was, how she never meant for any of this to happen. I kept my voice calm, asking her questions about the pills, and she admitted she'd been giving them to Gigi after school for months. She said Brandon convinced her it was safe, that the pills weren't supposed to hurt Gigi this much, that she only wanted to help Brandon with his stress about the Miami job. I let her talk for 20 minutes, getting everything on tape while I took notes on exactly what she was admitting to. Detective Grimes called the next morning to tell me he'd gotten search warrants for both Brandon's nightstand and Oilia's apartment based on all the evidence we'd gathered. They were going to execute both warrants at the same time that afternoon, so neither of them could warn the other or destroy evidence. Later that day, I sat with Detective Grimes in a small room at the police station, going through our credit card statements line by line. We found a clear pattern where Brandon ordered more pills every single time Gigi started to recover and gain weight back. The charges matched up perfectly with her worst episodes like clockwork. Every time she'd been hospitalized, there was a big pharmacy charge 2 weeks before. The detective took photos of everything, building his case file while I watched my marriage dissolve in credit card transactions. Melinda called me the next morning, while I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria trying to force down some toast. Her voice urgent as she explained we needed to file for emergency custody immediately. She met me at the courthouse that afternoon with a stack of forms already partially filled out, walking me through each section while Oliver colored quietly in his stroller beside us. The family court clerk took one look at the medical reports Melinda attached and expedited everything, scheduling us for the following week instead of the usual month-long wait. Melinda warned me that family court worked differently than criminal court, that the judge would care more about what was best for the kids than proving guilt. And she helped me organize my evidence into clear categories, showing I could keep them safe. She explained that Oliver would definitely stay with me, but the judge might still order supervised visits for Brandon until the criminal case was resolved, which made my stomach turn, but I understood the legal reality. Back at the hospital that evening, Dr. Fraser pulled me into a quiet conference room with Gigi's latest lab results spread across the table. The toxicology report showed levels of phentermine and synthetic thyroid hormones that made her shake her head, explaining how these substances had been slowly damaging Gigi's developing heart muscle over months. She pointed to specific numbers on the cardiac enzyme test showing ongoing damage that would need years of monitoring, maybe medication for life. I took notes on everything, my old nursing knowledge helping me understand the medical terms while also making it worse because I knew exactly how bad this was. The next morning, I met with Cormac Davenport in his small office downtown, bringing copies of all the new evidence that proved I'd been telling the truth about Gigi's symptoms all along. He reviewed my nursing board suspension paperwork alongside the toxicology reports, nodding as he saw how the timeline matched up perfectly, how every symptom I'd reported was now explained by the poisoning. He thought we had an excellent case for reinstatement since the suspension was based on suspicions that were completely false, and he started drafting the appeal right there while I watched. Later that day, Sananade called me to her office at Oliver's school, handing me a thick folder she'd been keeping for months without telling anyone. Inside were dated notes about every time Oliver mentioned Gigi being sick, every day she collapsed at pickup, every absence, every concerning comment from teachers who'd noticed the pattern, but didn't know what to make of it. She documented Oliver telling her about watching Gigi throw up after taking Daddy's special vitamins, about being scared to eat dinner, about hiding crackers under his bed in case he got sick too. This independent record from a mandatory reporter, who'd been watching our family deteriorate, would be huge for both the custody case and clearing my name. That night, while I was helping Oliver brush his teeth, my phone started blowing up with notifications from friends sending me screenshots of Brandon's Facebook posts. He'd written this long thing about how I had Munchausen syndrome, how I'd been making Gigi sick for attention, how he was just trying to protect his daughter from her mentally ill mother. I screenshot everything before he could delete it, remembering Detective Grimes telling me to document everything but not engage, to let Brandon keep talking and digging his own hole deeper. The next day, Detective Grimes called to tell me he'd interviewed Sydney at her house. And while she claimed she knew nothing about the pills, her story kept changing. First, she said she barely knew Brandon, then admitted he came to her gym 5 days a week, then finally admitted he was desperate to move to Miami for the promotion her husband had offered him. She let slip that Brandon had promised to bring his pageant-ready daughter to Miami, that her husband's company loved hiring executives with picture-perfect families. The pressure to have the right image suddenly made more sense. Meanwhile, Melinda spent hours going through the old CPS reports with fresh eyes, marking every place where Brandon or Oilia had deflected blame onto me. Every time they'd suggested I was unstable or neglectful, while they were literally poisoning my child. She showed me how they'd manipulated every interview, always being helpful and concerned while subtly pointing fingers at me, creating a pattern of suspicion that almost cost me everything. She typed up an official addendum removing all concerns about my parenting from the file, stating clearly that I'd been the victim of false accusations while trying to protect my daughter from medical abuse. 2 days later, Detective Grimes called me with big news. Oilia had broken during questioning and admitted everything. She'd been giving Gigi pills after school for 6 months, crushing them into juice or yogurt, increasing the dose whenever Brandon texted her that Gigi was gaining weight. She claimed Brandon manipulated her, that she thought the pills were safe supplements at first, but she admitted she kept giving them even after seeing how sick Gigi got. She'd agreed to testify against Brandon in exchange for lesser charges, providing emails and texts going back over a year, showing their whole plan. The hospital responded to all this by implementing strict security measures, putting Gigi on a restricted visitor list with only me and my parents allowed in without prior approval. They started a careful refeeding protocol since her body had been malnourished for so long, measuring every ounce of formula and tracking her weight gain carefully to avoid refeeding syndrome. Each tiny meal she kept down felt like a victory, watching her color slowly return as her body finally got the nutrition it had been denied. Sanonade helped me create a detailed safety plan for Oliver, teaching him a special word he could use if he ever felt unsafe, showing him how the new lock on the medicine cabinet worked, establishing predictable mealtimes so he'd know food would always be there. We practiced scenarios where he could tell a trusted adult if something scared him, giving him back some control after months of helplessness. And I watched his shoulders relax just a little bit each time we went through the routine. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of hospital bills that made my stomach hurt. The financial counselor at the hospital walked me through their charity care program forms, while Oliver colored next to me. She helped me fill out every line, showing me where to list Brandon's abandonment of the family and the criminal case. The program covered 60% of Gigi's ICU stay, but I still had to set up payment plans for the rest. $20 here, $50 there, whatever I could manage each month. At least now I knew what caused all this debt and could start rebuilding without Brandon draining our accounts for pills. Later that afternoon, while Oliver napped, I remembered our doorbell camera and logged into the app on my laptop. My hands shook as I scrolled back through weeks of footage. There she was, Oilia, walking up our front steps at 3:15 p.m. on a Tuesday when I worked late. Then again on Thursday at 3:20. Every single day I had afternoon shifts. She showed up right after the school bus dropped Gigi off. I downloaded every clip, watching her carry her big purse inside and leave 20 minutes later. The timestamps matched exactly when Gigi said she got her candy from Auntie. I emailed everything to Detective Grimes, who called me back within 10 minutes, saying this was exactly the evidence they needed for the search warrant. 2 days later, Detective Grimes called to tell me they'd executed the warrant on our house while Brandon was at work. They found a prescription bottle hidden behind his dress shoes in the back of his closet drawer, right where Gigi said Daddy kept the pink pills. The crime lab tested them and called back with results that made my blood run cold. The pills were a mix of banned diet drugs from Mexico and thyroid medication that speeds up metabolism. No wonder Gigi's heart kept racing and she couldn't keep food down. Detective Grimes said this physical evidence plus the doorbell footage gave them everything they needed for criminal charges. The emergency custody hearing happened 3 days later in family court downtown. I wore my only nice dress and brought copies of everything. The police reports, the lab results, the doorbell footage timestamps, all organized in a binder. Cormac helped me prepare. The judge read through the evidence while Brandon sat at the other table with his lawyer looking pale. She asked him one question about the pills found in his drawer and he started crying, saying he never meant for things to go this far. The judge cut him off and granted me immediate sole custody with a protective order requiring Brandon to stay away from us. He could only see the kids at a supervised visitation center once the criminal case was resolved. Oliver held my hand so tight as we walked out of the courthouse that his little fingernails left marks on my palm. A week later, the PICU doctor finally said the words I'd been praying to hear. Gigi was stable enough to come off the ventilator. I stood next to her bed, holding her hand as they removed the tube, watching her take her first real breath on her own in 7 days. She was so weak she could barely open her eyes, but she squeezed my fingers when I told her she was doing great. The feeding team came that afternoon to teach me about refeeding syndrome and how to help her recover at home. They showed me how to measure tiny amounts of formula every few hours, tracking everything she kept down, watching for signs her body couldn't handle the nutrition after being starved for so long. When Gigi finally woke up enough to talk, her voice scratchy and small, she asked if Daddy would come see her. I had to explain that Daddy was in timeout for giving her medicine that made her sick, using words a 7-year-old could understand while my heart broke. The story somehow got out to local news channels, and my phone started ringing nonstop with reporters wanting interviews. One reporter even showed up at the hospital trying to get past security to Gigi's room. Cormac told me to document everything but not talk to anyone. That protecting my kids' privacy was more important than telling my side publicly. I took screenshots of every message, every voicemail, keeping records in case we needed restraining orders against the media too. The nursing board called to schedule an informal conference about my suspended license, now that new evidence had come to light. I spent 3 full days at Cormac's office preparing my evidence packet, organizing medical records, police reports, and witness statements, showing I'd been trying to help my daughter while others were poisoning her. Cormac coached me on what to say, how to present the timeline clearly, reminding me this was my chance to get my career back. Then Detective Grimes called with news that shocked me, even though I shouldn't have been surprised anymore. Oilia's lawyer had contacted him offering a deal where she'd testify against Brandon for reduced charges. She gave them emails going back 14 months showing Brandon planning this whole thing, researching which pills to use, calculating doses, even looking up pageant schedules in Miami for after they moved. The betrayal went so much deeper than those last 6 months of pills. She had screenshots of Brandon telling her about Sydney's perfect daughters, and how Gigi needed to be thin enough to compete with them for his image at the new job. Detective Grimes asked if I'd be willing to make a recorded call to Brandon to get him talking about the pills. I sat in the police station with recording equipment, while Detective Grimes coached me on what to say. When Brandon answered, he immediately started crying and begging me to drop the charges, saying we could work things out as a family. I stayed calm and asked him why he gave our baby those pills. He said he just wanted us to have a better life in Miami. That Sydney's husband wouldn't promote him if his daughter wasn't pageant ready. That he did it all for us. I asked him directly if he knew the pills would hurt her. And he said he thought she'd be fine. That other girls took them all the time. That I was overreacting like always. Detective Grimes gave me a thumbs up as Brandon kept talking, digging his hole deeper with every word, still thinking he could manipulate me into forgiving him. The next day, we met with the pediatric cardiologist who pulled up Gigi's heart scans on his computer screen. He pointed to areas showing damage from the stimulants, explaining she'd probably have heart rhythm problems for years. We'd need EKGs every 3 months, maybe medication if the irregular beats got worse, and she couldn't play contact sports that might stress her heart. I took notes in my old nursing notebook, grateful I understood the medical terms, even though each word felt like another knife in my chest. He printed out a thick packet about living with pediatric arrhythmia, and went through warning signs to watch for. when to call 911, how to check her pulse properly. This wasn't going away anytime soon, but at least now we knew what we were dealing with and could get proper treatment instead of being blamed for mysterious symptoms. The next week, Sananaid called to set up Oliver's first therapy session at the school, explaining she'd use play therapy to help him work through everything he'd seen. I walked him to her office that first Thursday morning and watched him clutch his backpack straps so tight his knuckles went white. She had toys and art supplies spread across a low table, and let him pick what he wanted to do while I waited outside. Through the door, I heard her asking him to draw his family, and my heart broke when she showed me the picture later with just me, him, and Gigi. No daddy anywhere on the page. She said this was normal and would take time, but at least he was starting to express his feelings instead of keeping them locked inside. 3 days later, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. And when I answered, Brandon's voice made my blood run cold. He was calling from a burner phone, even though the protective order said no contact at all. His words came fast and angry, saying if I didn't drop the charges, he'd find a way to take the kids, that no judge would let them stay with someone who lost their nursing license. I grabbed my other phone to record while keeping him talking, letting him dig his hole deeper with each threat. He said he knew people who could make things hard for me, that I'd never work as a nurse again if I kept pushing this. The second he hung up, I called Detective Grimes and played him the recording. He came to take my statement that afternoon and said this violation would hurt Brandon bad in court, since it showed he couldn't follow basic rules. 2 weeks passed before the district attorney's office called to say they were filing formal charges against both Brandon and Oilia. The prosecutor explained Brandon faced 3 counts of child endangerment, plus administering harmful substances to a minor and conspiracy charges that could mean serious prison time. Oilia got charged as an accomplice, which carried less time, but still meant she'd have a criminal record forever. The arraignment got scheduled for the following Monday at the courthouse downtown. I sat in the back row watching Brandon stand before the judge in an orange jumpsuit while his lawyer argued for reasonable bail. The judge read through the charges and the evidence, including the protective order violation from the burner phone call. She set bail at $200,000 with strict conditions, including GPS monitoring and absolutely no contact with me or the kids. Brandon's parents sat in the front row, and his mother started crying when she heard what her son had done to Gigi. They posted his bail but wouldn't look at him when he walked out. Meanwhile, Cormac worked on getting my nursing license back, filing a motion for reconsideration with all the new evidence showing I'd been blamed for symptoms I was trying to treat. The board scheduled a hearing for next month, and Cormac said they seemed open to reversing the suspension since the real cause of Gigi's illness was now clear. He helped me organize every piece of evidence, including the criminal charges against Brandon and Oilia, plus statements from the doctors who treated Gigi. Melinda came by the house for her follow-up assessment, watching how the kids were doing now that Brandon was gone. Oliver actually ate dinner at the table while she was there, and Gigi showed her the art project she'd been working on during recovery. Melinda wrote in her report that both kids were stable and safe with me, that Oliver was showing improvement with therapy, and Gigi was getting stronger every day. She recommended closing the emergency intervention since there was no danger anymore, and said the system that once suspected me was now protecting us from the real threat. A week later, I found a letter in my mailbox with Oilia's return address on it. My hand shook as I opened it and read her begging for forgiveness, claiming she loved Gigi like her own daughter and never meant for things to go this far. She wrote that Brandon manipulated her and she just wanted to help make him happy, that she never thought the pills would really hurt Gigi. I didn't respond and gave the letter to Detective Grimes for evidence, maintaining the no-contact order because her choices nearly killed my daughter and forgiveness wasn't mine to give. The hospital's financial counselor called with good news. The Charity Care program approved coverage for most of Gigi's medical bills from this whole nightmare. I still owed about $15,000, but they set up a payment plan I could manage if I picked up extra shifts. I started working per diem at a walk-in clinic 3 days a week. Not the head nurse position I'd lost, but honest work that helped pay bills while I waited for my license hearing. Every Thursday night, I went to a support group at the hospital for parents of kids with medical problems. The first time I walked in, I felt like everyone would judge me. But when I shared our story, other parents nodded with recognition. One mother said her ex-husband had given their son steroids for sports without telling her, And another woman's mother-in-law had been sneaking allergy medication that made her granddaughter sick. We weren't alone in dealing with family members who hurt our kids while claiming to help them. 6 weeks after the arraignment, the prosecutor called to say the grand jury returned indictments against both Brandon and Oilia. She explained this meant there was enough evidence for a real trial, though she thought Brandon would probably take a plea deal rather than risk a jury verdict. She walked me through how plea bargains worked and what to expect if he took one versus going to trial. Either way, it would be months before anything got resolved, but at least the legal system was moving forward and taking this seriously. 3 weeks later, I sat in the school conference room with Sananade while we went through every detail of Gigi's medical needs for her return to class. The principal took notes as we mapped out bathroom breaks every 2 hours, snacks at specific times to keep her blood sugar stable, and a quiet space where she could rest if her heart started racing. Sananade handed out copies of the 504 plan to each teacher, making sure everyone understood that Gigi might need to leave class suddenly if she felt dizzy or sick. The nurse showed me where they'd keep her emergency medications, and we practiced the protocol for calling me if anything happened. Small steps, but each one felt huge after everything we'd been through. That same week, Cormac called with news from the nursing board meeting where they reviewed all the evidence showing I'd been blamed for symptoms I was actually trying to treat. They voted to give me provisional reinstatement with a supervisor checking my work for 6 months. Not the full clearance I wanted, but enough to start working again while the criminal case moved forward. Cormac said this was a major win considering how hard it is to get a suspended license back, and that full reinstatement would probably come after the trial ended. I cried when I got the letter because it meant I could support my kids without depending on anyone else's money. Melinda came by the house one last time with paperwork showing CPS was officially closing our case and moving us to voluntary monitoring where I just check in monthly to update them on the kids' progress. She sat at my kitchen table going through her final report, pointing out how every concern from the old investigations made sense now that we knew about the poisoning. The system that once suspected me of starving my daughter now recognized I'd been fighting to save her the whole time. She'd never seen a case reverse so completely in 20 years of doing this work. 2 days before the trial date, I met Detective Grimes and the prosecutor at the courthouse to practice my testimony. They walked me through every question they'd ask and warned me about what Brandon's lawyer might try to bring up to make me look bad. My hands shook holding the water glass, but my voice stayed steady as I practiced describing finding those texts, watching Gigi's seizures, learning what they'd done to her. The prosecutor said I'd make a strong witness because I had specific dates and medical records for everything. Detective Grimes reminded me to just tell the truth and let the evidence speak for itself. The morning of the trial, Brandon's lawyer called mine to say he'd take a plea deal for child endangerment with mandatory treatment and supervised visits only at a court facility. He'd get probation instead of prison, but would have to complete parenting classes and stay away from us except for those monitored visits once a month. The prosecutor said this was actually good because it meant no trial where the kids might have to testify. And Brandon admitted guilt on the record. I wanted him in prison, but keeping him away from us mattered more than revenge. Oilia took her plea the same day, getting community service and having to pay $30,000 in restitution for medical bills over 5 years. The judge made the no-contact order permanent, meaning she could never come near us again or she'd go straight to jail. Watching her in court with her hair unwashed and dark circles under her eyes brought no satisfaction. Just sadness that someone I'd trusted for so long could hurt my baby for a man who didn't even love her. Finally, after 2 months in the hospital, Gigi came home with a thick binder of care instructions, including cardiology appointments every 2 weeks, special nutrition shakes 3 times a day, and therapy twice a week. She gained 5 pounds, and her cheeks had color again instead of that scary gray tint. Oliver helped me set up her room with new butterfly decorations and a special chart where she could track taking her real medications that would help her heart heal. He even made her a welcome home sign with glitter that said, "Best sister ever," and hung it on her door. We started having family dinners again 3 nights a week, with Oliver actually sitting at the table instead of taking food to his room. He still kept crackers in his nightstand, and sometimes I'd catch him watching Gigi eat like he was making sure she wouldn't fall over. But seeing her keep food down and laugh at his jokes helped more than any therapy session. Progress wasn't a straight line, but we were moving forward together, learning to trust that meals could be safe again. Cormac confirmed the nursing board approved me for regular shifts with supervision at the clinic, rebuilding my career one day at a time. The income was half what I made as head nurse, but steady enough to pay rent and buy groceries without panic. My supervisor said I was doing great, and would probably get full clearance within 3 months if everything kept going well. After getting nasty messages from Brandon's family, and people who only knew his version of events, I deleted all my social media accounts to focus on healing, instead of defending myself to strangers. Every violation of the protective order got documented and sent to Detective Grimes, who warned Brandon's family that harassment would mean criminal charges for them too. Peace mattered more than public vindication, and my kids needed me present, not fighting battles online. The family court judge looked at Brandon's lawyer while shuffling through the thick stack of papers on her desk. 2 months had passed since the plea deal, and now we sat in the wood-paneled courtroom to finalize custody. Brandon sat across the aisle in his best suit, hands folded like he was at church. His lawyer kept pushing for mediation, saying we could work things out privately without all these restrictions. I shook my head when my lawyer looked at me. Some things just can't be mediated away. The judge agreed and signed the order, giving Brandon 1 supervised visit per month at the county visitation center. He'd have to check in with security, stay in the monitored playroom, and leave when the hour was up. No overnight visits, no taking them to his apartment, no unsupervised contact until they turned 18. The bailiff handed me my copy of the order, and I tucked it into my folder with all the other court documents. Detective Grimes met me in the courthouse lobby the next week with a box of paperwork and evidence photos. The case was officially closed now that both Brandon and Oilia took their pleas. He handed me a card with victim resources and wrote his personal cell number on the back. Said to call if Brandon violated the order or if we needed anything. He'd worked dozens of child abuse cases, but said ours was one of the strongest he'd seen. The evidence was so clear that Brandon had no choice but to take the deal. Justice wasn't perfect since he avoided prison, but at least my kids were safe. I drove to what used to be my mother's house after leaving the courthouse. The new owners had already painted it yellow and put up different curtains. I sat in my car looking at the kitchen window where she used to stand washing dishes while I did homework at the table. She'd raised me alone after Dad left, working double shifts at the factory to keep us fed. The house was gone now, sold to pay for specialists who couldn't figure out what was wrong with Gigi because the real problem was her own father. But Mom's strength lived on in how I protected my children. She would have fought just as hard. That afternoon, Gigi came home from school with a permission slip for art club. She'd been back in class for 3 weeks now, and her teacher said she was doing great. I asked if she was sure she didn't want to try pageants again since we still had all her dresses and costumes in the closet. She shook her head hard and said she never wanted to wear those clothes again. Art club met on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she could paint whatever she wanted. We spent the evening bagging up every pageant dress, every pair of dance shoes, every sparkling tiara and hair bow. She helped me carry the bags to the donation bin at the church, watching them disappear into the metal container. She was choosing her own path now. Oliver sat at the dinner table 5 nights that week, actually eating with us instead of taking his plate to his room. He still kept crackers and juice boxes in his nightstand drawer, and I'd find granola bar wrappers under his bed. His therapist said this was normal after what he'd been through. The hoarding would fade as he felt safer. He watched Gigi eat her whole meal without getting sick, saw her keep her food down and ask for seconds. Small victories mattered most. After the kids went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table organizing my binder with all our important papers, court orders in the front pocket, then medical records sorted by date, therapy notes, school documents, and emergency contacts, all labeled with tabs. The prosecutor's card, Detective Grimes' number, the victim advocate's information. Having everything organized gave me control when so much had been chaos. Being prepared meant being protected. 6 months after getting my provisional license back, the nursing board sent the letter making it permanent with no restrictions. My supervisor had written a glowing recommendation about my work at the clinic. I'd passed every review, never missed a shift, handled every patient with care. I went to the craft store and bought a simple black frame, hanging the reinstatement letter on the wall next to my original license from 10 years ago. Both told my story, the falling and the getting back up. That night, after homework and baths, the house settled into quiet. Gigi read a library book in her bed, propped up on pillows with her stuffed animals around her. Oliver actually slept through the whole night without waking up scared or checking on his sister. No crisis calls from the school. No court dates on the calendar tomorrow. No medical emergencies to handle. I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, listening to the dishwasher run and the clock tick on the wall. Safety wasn't exciting or dramatic, but it was everything we needed. We were finally home, really home. In our small apartment with second-hand furniture and peace.